Hello, welcome back to the Football Hipsters English Breakfast podcast. I am your host, Chris, as usual, at least almost always, and I'm joined by my fellow host for Sunday evenings, Mr. Ross Bramble. Good evening, Ross.
Good evening to you, sir.
And I won't ask you how you are because we'll come on to that very shortly. But hopefully 24 hours has made it feel a little bit less painful until you have to talk about it again. More on that in a moment. We have another guest again this evening, and we didn't scare him off last week, which was good. So we thought we'd bring Josh back for a second appearance. Good evening, Josh.
Good evening. It's almost becoming Stockholm Syndrome.
It is a bit, isn't it? Yeah. Just you wait till we start dragging you onto all the pods, like all the time. It's good to have you. More than welcome to join us again. So we have an absolute, just gargantuan amount of stuff to talk about this weekend. It's been one of those weekends where lots of stuff's happened in lots of different games. We'll start, as we always do, with the Premier League games, and we're going to start with the very first one of the weekend, which was the Manchester City-Chelsea game. So many things to talk about in this, but let's start with the result. A win for Chelsea at the City of Manchester Stadium by 3-1. Ross, surprised or not?
Not myself, I don't think. Maybe the manner of the scoreline caught me out a little bit. I didn't think Manchester City would concede 3. But no, I'm not overly shocked. I thought this was kind of on the cards because Chelsea have been a lot better than Man City so far this year. I know when Man City were doing really well, Chelsea were doing quite poorly, and then vice versa. But when Chelsea were on top, and since Chelsea have been on top, I should say, for me, they've looked better than at any point when Manchester City were on top in the first 10 games. I really like the way Chelsea play, and it's kind of odd as a neutral in the title race to be supporting Chelsea, because for generations now it's been kind of uncool to like Chelsea in title races. But I didn't think this was too bad a shock. I thought the scoreline was a little bit embarrassing, perhaps on their home turf for Pep. But no, I wasn't too shocked to see Chelsea win this one.
Fair point. And Josh, on the two managers, pre-season, I think both myself and Ross said that Conte would be one to watch. We felt that he would have the edge on Guardiola. Do you buy into the cult of Pep, as I've lovingly mocked it for? Don't get me wrong, he's obviously a very good manager. It'd be stupid to say otherwise, but maybe a little bit overdone with all this constant praise and everything going for him, because he hasn't won anything yet, and time after time it seems a little bit one-dimensional to me. Did you see a little bit of that on Saturday?
A little bit. It's one of the makings that you say of a player is how they deal with failure. And I think the same can be said of Pep, because he hasn't really had any setbacks in his career. So it'll be interesting to see how he'll deal with this, especially with a more competitive league, especially with the first time he'll experience no winter break as well. So that's another thing that could be playing on his mind as these fixtures come up, to make sure he can rotate. And I'm sure the incidents at the end of the game won't help with that planning.
No, we should we should touch on those in
if I may, Chris, before we quickly go on to that, I would like to ask you the question of Pep, because we have a divide even within our podcast over Pep Guardiola, and I think you and I are mostly on the same page with this, but I've spoken ad nauseum at this point about the fact I'm not mad on Pep's Man City. I love him as a coach. I think he's a phenomenal coach and fascinating to listen to. But I'm still not sold on him at Manchester City, and I think his Barcelona side was incredible, but Bayern and City haven't matched up to it yet. And I think there's still a carry-on from the Barcelona side. But I don't think we've really heard your side of it yet, and I'd be interested to hear what you think of him.
I'm just obviously I have sort of views that are against the norm, I would say. I just feel that I'm on that train that says he hasn't really been properly tested yet. And I know people will say, Barcelona, that they didn't win it under Tata Martino, and Luis Enrique is clearly struggling this season, and you couldn't just put Joe Bloggs in charge and win it. But I feel that with the options he had at his disposal, and the same with Bayern Munich, I just felt that the squads he had at the times he had them, there wasn't as much of a challenge as Man City is. And I also feel that when he had a lot of his success at Barcelona, it was very new. It was very, this whole pressing thing, the sort of the tiki-taka before it became, obviously he now says he never likes tiki-taka. That wasn't, well, he can say that, but it was, let's be honest, when it first came through at Barca, it was very much possession based and moving the ball. And I just feel a little bit like, not so much he's been found out per se, but I feel like some of the teams are looking at City now and going, yeah, they play pretty patterns, and yes, they move the ball, and yes, they can score goals, but they can be got at. And the one thing that I really, really can't get my head around, this might be slightly controversial, I think he's quite arrogant. And when I say that, I say it in the respects of, if you look at how he plays players out of position, and he seems to think that, well, I'm Guardiola, I can do it my way and it will work. As an Arsenal fan, I can tell you playing Gael Clichy at left back is bad enough. Playing him in midfield will not work. And players like Otamendi, playing Kolarov at centre back, playing Raheem Sterling as at centre forward at times. He's played Sane as a central midfielder. It's just I don't buy it personally. And yeah, we'll come on to other managers that I've been I've been poked at for not particularly buying into their philosophies, but I'm not sure that I buy into the hype, and I think the Premier League might find him out a little bit. So
I think we're relatively on the same page, more or less on the Pep thing. I'm not completely against him. Don't get me wrong, but I certainly think there are tests in the Premier League that he hasn't faced before, and I think
yes,
it's not fair to say anyone could have managed that Barcelona side and done everything that he did with it. But I think they had some incredible parts for him to work with that he will never be able to find again. And I think he was not exactly found out in Germany, but a lot of Bayern fans said he was quite dull to watch, and they weren't overly impressed by it. There seems to be a carry-on from the Spain period, and he might very well bring it to Man City yet, but I'm not totally convinced on him just yet, like you.
Yes, yeah, I think it's time will tell, and again, I have to stress, and I will stress again, I'm not saying he's a bad coach. I'm not saying he doesn't have brilliant ideas. He clearly does. I'm just on the side of the fence that says I'm not convinced yet, but we will see. One thing I was convinced by, Josh, let's get your views on this. The end of the game. City were beaten in disgrace in the end. I felt Aguero. I love Sergio Aguero. I think he's a top quality player. Really, really is. But he lost his head. He has previous with David Luiz. Doesn't everyone? And the tackle was absolutely horrendous. I mean, it's a career-ending challenge if the player's legs planted. Do you see retrospective action being taken to extend the ban? Because it all went off, and that caused, of course, the incident between Fernandinho and Fabregas as well. Can you see this going higher up the line for suspensions? I
think, and it sounds terrible to say, if Aguero had broken David Luiz's leg, then yes, we could have seen something more than I believe the 4-game ban he's getting for it being his second red card of the season. Will be one of them retrospectively for an elbow. But other than that, I think we'll just see next week Chelsea and Man City both getting fined for failure to control their players. A bit like we saw in the Spurs game at the end of last season involving Chelsea, where they're a team that know how to get into another team's face and knows how to provoke a reaction. We've seen it for a number of years and had initially pinned it on their managers, but it looks like they've still got that edge in their game that somehow they managed to rile other teams up and provoke such reactions like Fabregas got from Fernandinho.
Makes you wonder if other managers will look at that as well and think, we can get at this City side. And Guardiola was, I know Mourinho will probably be saying, well, what has he done differently that I haven't, with the sort of sarcastic applause and whatnot. And I think even Martin Tyler said on the Sky commentary, his advice to Josie was just smile, because Guardiola tends to sort of just smile it off and get away with it. But nevertheless, not exactly the way to accept defeat in a classiest way. And now there's 2 big players suspended for big games. So... Yeah. Okay. Well, that was the big game to start the weekend. And then we obviously moved into the 3:00 kickoffs. Sorry, Ross, but we have to do this very briefly. Your Saints side were taken apart by Mr. Pardew's Crystal Palace side, 3-0. Did it flatter Crystal Palace? Because the game, or the bits I saw of the game, Southampton were largely on top, possession-wise, seemed to be fairly in control, and then it all just went a bit nuts.
3-0 is extremely flattering in my opinion. I think anyone that watched the full 90 minutes will A, completely understand how we lost it, and B, completely understand how fortunate Palace were to win it. I'm not saying that we were absolutely fantastic on the day. The first half, especially after the 2 goals went in, was a bit messy. And the period beforehand, we looked all right. I think Bertrand had a shot deflected just wide. Buffal looked like he had a 30-yard curler in him on the day, but it never really came off. And then obviously the first goal's gone in, and I think that first mistake, the Fraser Forster own goal. Well, it's not an own goal, is it? It's a Font back pass across the face of goal. Forster has gone to kick it with his left. It's bounced off his right, and it's broken free for Benteke to tap in. He can't miss it. I don't think if that doesn't happen, I don't think it ends 3-0. You know, if he just managed to huff that clear, then I don't think Palace ever sniff in that game, because they were nowhere near. You know, they just weren't of much quality. They didn't create much. The only chance they had before the goal was a Benteke header that they put quite well wide. And I know it's going to sound like sour grapes. I know it sounds like biased reporting, but they really weren't in it. You know, they didn't have to be in the second half. I fully appreciate that. They were 2-0 up. They could just sit back and defend, and they did that very well. But offensively, they just weren't really there, and all 3 of their goals are silly mistakes from us and simple tap-ins. And it's not the first time we've had this. It's not the first time that Southampton have beaten themselves this season. Hull, Inter Milan, Man United, even Arsenal. You know, it just seems like we're getting into a bit of a habit now of throwing games away that we're in full control of. But yeah, I mean, full credit to Palace for the way they defended in the second half. But all 3 goals are so bad from us. We've given them all 3, and outside of the 3 goals they've scored, I can't think of a single chance that they've had aside from Benteke's header wide. You know, it was all us in the second half. We just didn't have a cutting edge, and ultimately that's what's cost us. But yeah, I was really embarrassed watching it back on Match of the Day, honestly, because there's such bad goals to concede. But we can't dwell on it. You know, it's painful to watch it. It's painful to look at the scoreline. But we've got a massive game against Apoel Beersheva now on Thursday. It's winner take all for the knockout stages of the Europa League. We've got to shrug it off and we've got to use it. But it's a tough one to take, especially when you watch the whole 90 minutes and you can't really understand how we've not got anything from that game. But yeah, it's one of those. Full credit to Palace. Pardew stops the rot at 6. It's normally 5 or 6, so I was a bit worried going into this game anyway. But yeah, I think 3-0 is quite painful considering the quality of the goals that we've conceded.
Yeah, it's a huge leap for Palace and a much-needed victory for Mr. Pardew, who I don't think is completely off the hook yet, because a lot of the owners will look at this and say, right, well, can we build on this now? So it'll be interesting to see how they carry on.
They were quite poor, and next week they've got Hull, who I can only think are the other team that are as bad as Palace or maybe Swansea are at the moment, because even Sunderland have turned a bit of a corner at the moment. And I can't think of a team much worse than Palace outside of Hull. So they've got another big game next week. I think that will be much more important than this one was, because they will not be gifted 3 goals like that again.
No, away from home as well. That will be a bit more of a stern test. We shall see how they perform. Let's move back to the sort of top end of the table again then, Josh. And the Spurs side that were beaten last week, all sorts of questions asked of them, of their manager, of a lot of their players after the Champions League exit, followed by their first defeat of the season. They got back on the horse, so to speak, this weekend with a 5-0 demolition job on Swansea. Now, to an outsider looking in, you'd say, yeah, 5-0, comfortable victory, dominated the game, fully deserved it. I'd like to talk to you about Dele Alli, though, and his... some people will say this is a little bit biased. I just think it's reporting the facts. He likes a tumble. and he likes to provoke a tumble. This is something that's creeping into his game that I can't help but feel referees are either not picking up on or choosing not to pick up on. Lots of incidents highlighted, and this weekend's, questionable is putting it very lightly. Was it a penalty for you, the first goal?
No, I would agree with you. Looking back at that specific incident, it is a dive that he's looked to win, and as much as you want to blame the player, the referees and the FA aren't helping the case, because it's blatant to see that that's what he's doing, and the ref should be calling up on that, or the linesman, because the linesman could see from his position whether or not that's a dive, and it's should be bringing in like video replays for penalty decisions, because that's cost Swansea potentially a game plan after 39 minutes, which they didn't deserve to do. Yes, they may have conceded earlier because they are awful at the back, because it could have easily been 10 or 11 to Spurs in the end, but to kind of open the deadlock and get Swansea to start attacking them, it's not really a fair way to do it.
No, I tend to agree with you. I just think it was very, very, very soft at best, putting it nicely. And
it was a great dive.
Quickly,
it was a very good dive. It's a very clever one. And
it was a clever one. I think
if you're studying how to dive, that's a great one to watch.
Way to do it.
But you can't forgive it, can you?
It was very Jamie Vardy-esque, if I dare say so myself. Just quickly on Swansea, Ross, they obviously had that massive win last week over Palace, albeit in testing circumstances. Does a result like this just undo all that good work? Because they probably went to Spurs thinking, well, we're not going to get a lot from this game, but a 5-0 demolition job, it can't help their fragile confidence, surely.
No, and Bob Bradley said he knew his best 11 going into this game, and he clearly didn't play it, because they ended up losing by 5. It will set them back. It can't not, I don't think. But at the same time, like you say, they weren't really expecting to get much out of Tottenham, I suspect. It's just one of those you just got to kind of say, yeah, you know what, we were never really on for that. It's a shame it had to be 5, and move on to the next one. But at the same time, you look at the stats, they've conceded 31 goals so far this season. It's pretty bad, pretty shaky. And if it wasn't for the 5 they scored last week, they're on 16 at the moment. But if not for that crazy game, would have been 11. So, it's tough for Swansea at the moment, and Bob Bradley's got a hell of a lot of work on, and already there's questions over whether he should be staying or going, which I think is a bit silly. I know they've not been great since he's taken over, but you've got to invest in him. It's a tough result for Swansea, and I can't think of who they've got next week, but that's going to be another big test. They need to get something from it, or at least improve on the performance.
Home to Sunderland next week. Massive game. Oh. Yeah, absolutely huge. That will focus on with us very much a high point in the podcast next week. So we will look at that. Just glossing over a couple of other results. We don't mean to gloss over these clubs, and I apologise, but we are pressed for time this week because we've got so much to get through. Stoke with a 2-0 victory over Burnley. Probably expected in the grand scheme of things. Jonathan Walters. Go on.
Yeah, I was going to say Jonathan Walters' first goal. That was pretty special.
It was, yeah. But actually, we should mention that because it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
As was Munies's as well, the young Barcelona defender who joined not so long ago. So good result that for Stoke, and as you say, credit where credit's due. Walters' goal was a little bit tasty. So good result that for Stoke. We also saw West Brom. They continue to impress, making a complete shambles. My prediction for them going down. They won 3-1 against Watford. Johnny Evans, Chris Brunt, and Matt Phillips, who seems to be really coming of age. 1 goal back for Cabasele for Watford wasn't enough. Maybe flattered West Brom a touch. Thought Watford were quite good for long periods, but nevertheless, West Brom up to 7th now. My goodness me. And the other game I just want to briefly mention is Sunderland-Leicester. Just get your thoughts on this one, Josh, because myself and Ross have been saying about the Leicester dream is fantastic, and obviously what they did last year was fantastic, etc., etc. But there has to come a point where they have to look at this now and go, we need to get points over the Christmas period ahead of their Champions League dream, because they're sinking down the table like a stone, whereas David Moyes and the Sunderland boys are slowly showing signs of a phoenix from the flames rising up that table. So what do you make of Leicester, and are you convinced by Sunderland enough to think that they can go on this run and keep it going?
So I think I said last week about Leicester that they've got a team built of people who haven't won anything really, which is the biggest problem, because now this season they kind of aren't the underdog in any game anymore, and they also are a bit like sitting back, don't know how to get up for a game. We've seen it with World Cup winners saying the next game after they're a bit, haven't got the same fire in their belly, and I think that's the same problem that Leicester have got at the moment. There's now calls for whether or not Ranieri should be looking to go, which I think are far too premature, especially, as you say, the Champions League goes on a winter break after the midweek fixtures, which Leicester are already through. So it's a bit of I think it's dead rubber against Porto midweek. So I'm not too, I would wait till after January before making any rash statements or decisions with that squad. And compared to Sunderland, David Moyes looks like he's sorted them out and coming into a transfer window where he's going to get some defenders. He knows how to set up a back four, which is something he was credited for at Everton, especially when Martinez then came in and undid all his good work within 2 seasons. I think Sunderland could look to press in there, but there are another group of clubs in there that look like they could sink, West Ham being another one, who I'm sure we'll speak about later.
Perfectly set up, because they are my next one on the agenda actually. Ross, I don't know if you saw this game, but London Stadium, obviously big atmosphere going into the game between West Ham and Arsenal. It's a London derby. Arsenal coming off the back of November, which is notoriously not a particularly good month for them, and West Ham on the back of they lost to Manchester United, but an encouraging performance at Old Trafford the week before, and encouraging periods of the game in midweek in the EFL Cup. It ended 5-1 to Arsenal. Would it be an exaggeration to say that West Ham are in serious danger of a relegation fight this season? Because there's too many things for me that are not going well there. And I don't know if you saw the post-match interview of Slaven Bilic. He threw every player under the bus. He questioned the application in training, questioned the attitude of the players coming into the game, questioned the application of the players during the game. I mean, I know he's got injuries, but he's got to be under some serious pressure now, isn't he?
Yeah, and I was going to say a second ago that I think Leicester are in a relegation fight now, because we're 14 games into a season, almost the halfway stage, and they are 15th on 13 points. West Ham are 17th on 12, so there's no way they're not in it if Leicester are, and I've read a lot of West Ham tweets this weekend, because I was watching the goals go in for Arsenal, and I was really interested in seeing the West Ham fan reaction. Because obviously, if you've been listening to the podcast the past 10 months or so, then my big problem with West Ham is the propaganda, the way the club says that they're going to be this, that and the other, and they're going to buy this, that and the other, and they're always on TV saying, we're in the market for a world-class striker, he's a World Cup player, etc. And then they bring in Simone Zaza, who's been really, really poor. And for me, it's the propaganda that winds me up. So I was interested to see what the fan reaction was. And the fans, almost unanimously, are saying that there's no one they like in their team anymore. There's no one player that they look to in this team. And that they have seen better West Ham sides go down, namely the 2002-2003 team go down, than this current crop, which is quite surprising to me. There's a lot of fans that I was reading on Twitter that are saying that the Davids are ruining the club, that they're taking them backwards, and that something has to change. It's a shambles, all of it. It's amazing how far this club has fallen since last season, and it's quite amazing to see how quickly everything is unravelling for them. Because, like I say, it's the propaganda that winds me up. It's the way the chairman talk about the club and how big it's going to be, and how big the fans buy into it, and the way the Twitter account posts tweets about how Dimitri Payet's as good as Ozil, and how they're going to, achieve this and that in the Europa League, and they get knocked out by, was it Astra that knocked them out this year again? It's that side of it that winds me up. And it was fascinating this week to see the fans almost rebelling on social media and saying, look, I don't care what it is, but something's got to change. Unanimously, though, they seem to still be behind Bilic. They all seem to be in favour of keeping him, but they kind of feel like something has to give, and it might very well be him, because it's not likely to be the chairman. But it could be a massive January. That could be what keeps them up this year. But yeah, they are in a massive slog, and I've been especially impressed with the way that Sunderland have started to turn things around. I know a couple of weeks ago we were saying that they were dead and buried, but now they seem to really be picking up some good momentum, some much better performances, especially this week against Leicester. And they are a point behind West Ham, who they've got to be eyeing up as the next scalp.
True that, yeah, very true. It's all starting to concertina up, and as for Bilic, I mean, I say he looked a really beaten man after the game. Just looked really down. I'm not really surprised when you get beaten that comfortably at home. Just from actually before I just mentioned Arsenal side of things. I'm sure he's not listening, but I just want to take this opportunity to say, Paul Merson, you, sir, are a prat. Anyone that saw the comments that he came out with about Dimitri Payet, yeah, I mean, if you want a different perspective, if you look up Nathan Staples on Twitter, who's an Englishman who follows the French league as closely as I do, wrote a very eloquent piece on Paul Merson's comments, which were essentially stating that West Ham, that Payet was nothing until West Ham bought him, and that nobody would have ever heard of him had he not made his reputation at Upton Park. Which is, if you know Dimitri Payet and you know the sort of player he is, that is the biggest load of nonsense you've ever written. And maybe Mr. Merson should concentrate on learning how to pronounce players' names correctly before sharing such stupid opinions. I'll get off my soapbox. Josh, what was your thoughts from an Arsenal perspective? Because, okay, West Ham weren't great, but there were goals to be had there, and Arsenal punished them, particularly one Chilean now centre forward, it seems.
Yeah, it was from an Arsenal perspective, an absolutely fantastic result. Before the game, I thought there would be goals. To see 5 go in, I think it could have been more, to be honest. Arsenal weren't particularly clinical in the first half. In the second half, turned that around, and Chilean fella, he ain't half bad, is he? I've got
Quite
a lot
handy,
of time. Yeah, I've got a lot of time for a player that knows how to beat a man without ever touching the ball. And that final goal, albeit he was offside when he put it in, just to put the keeper on his backside and lift it over the top, it was absolutely brilliant to see. And this team looks full of confidence and are slowly going about their business after a not great start to the season.
Yeah, things have started to turn around.
What's changed with Alexis? Because I didn't think he could play centre forward. Every Arsenal fan I've ever heard has said he can't play centre forward. So what's changed? Is it just that he's got a good run, or is it the players around him? Or?
No, it's the interchanging with Mesut Ozil that has changed that. He's now got a proper relationship with him now in the field. So he'll come and drop deep whilst Ozil will run past him. And that's why Ozil's now got more goals to his game, and Alexis has brought more assists. And it's just that pace in the front line now, and that extra movement that he's offering and allowing Arsenal to press higher up the pitch.
Yeah, I agree, and I also think it's the change of system that Arsenal have employed, putting him up top, because I think everybody, opposition teams, were always set up knowing Arsenal had Giroud up front, and I think now playing Alexis and keeping him there, it's a different set of issues to deal with. I said at the start of the season when we started playing him there, I said if you give it 6 months and you properly put the faith in Alexis as a centre forward, I personally believe he can be what Suarez was to Liverpool. In the end, you know, that ability to just win a game on his own. And I think yesterday he wouldn't say single-handedly won the game on his own, but he was a magnificent. Just everything he did was magnificent, and that step over with a flick to finish was just wow. I mean, it's It was
also nice to see Mesut Ozil get an assist for once,
Yeah, yeah.
He's not had too many this season.
No, he's been a bit quiet, hasn't he, recently? And also a word for Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, who had a mixed day. I mean, very frustrating at times with his crossing, but nevertheless, I think he had 4 key passes, an assist, and a goal. So I mean, you can't knock that. So that will do his confidence the world of good. Unlike social media's lack of confidence in Carl Jenkinson, which is a shame this week. But nevertheless, a good result. It
was a great shout out for Gabriel as well for playing after the week he's had.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and we're not going to go into the details again of the tragedy in midweek, but nevertheless, obviously we dedicated last week's podcast to it, and let's hope that things start to go in the right direction for that club and its fans and supporters and friends and family. So. Yeah, another little nod to that, and all the clubs pretty much universally observed the minute silence very well this weekend. So good credit given to them for that. So that was the weekend as far as the Saturday fixtures go, and then on the Sunday we'll go in reverse order. We'll start with Everton Manchester United because a fair bit happened in this one. Ross, who do you think is the happier side in this one? Because Ronald Koeman seems to be having issues, which I know you'll enjoy greatly. But for me, the myth of Romelu Lukaku is starting to become clear. And I don't know if you saw the incident when the camera happened to catch Ross Barkley on the bench, who didn't get on again today, mainly I think because of injuries. 2 substitutions were forced. But head in his hands, shaking his head, visibly upset. Do you feel like Koeman is in danger of losing some of this dressing room and some of the supporters with it? Because a 1-1 draw at home to United, you normally say is a good result, but they were awful first half, and they got quite lucky that Fellaini happened to barge his way into Gueye to give the penalty away in the last minute.
Yeah, they were. It's a great point for them, and I think that they're going to be the happier of the two because they didn't really deserve anything from it. As for Koeman, it's the hallmarks of everything I saw at the end of his time with Southampton. If you cast your minds back, we started this podcast in January of this year, the English Breakfast. And when I first came on, we were right in the middle of that dire Christmas run. And I was trying to explain, in as quickly as I possibly could, what had changed from the start of the season and the season before I had with Koeman to what was happening at that point. And all I could really pin it on was the fact that he just won't change. He'll get his starting 11 and he'll stick with it, and come hell or high water, it's that 11 no matter what. And Barkley can't get into it. He's got other options. He's got players he prefers and players that he thinks work better. Lukaku is a player that I really like, but I've never understood why he gets hyped as much as he does. He's not a big game player. He's not done it consistently enough. But he's still a very good player, and I don't see the eagerness in myself to dismiss him. But at the same time, I don't see the eagerness in myself to hype him up too much. He's a very good player, but he's not there yet. He's a bigger club for me. Needs better service. But the Koeman thing is very interesting. It's everything that I saw over the Christmas period last year for us, but magnified. Because like I keep saying, Everton are not set up in the same way that Southampton are. He hasn't got the backroom staff and the setup backstage to address some of these issues as well as we did. But even then, we didn't do it for like 11 games. We got 1 win in that run until he finally put Shane Long in because Graziano Pella got injured. And Seamus Coleman getting injured. If it is a serious injury, I think it was a stamp from or a kick from Ibrahimovic that got him a bit dizzy, forced them into bringing on Mason Holgate. If that's an injury that's going to keep him out for a few weeks, it's going to give Mason Holgate an opportunity in the first team, which the fans have been paying for, and I'd love to see because I think Holgate's a fantastic young defender. And if he can break into it, then you might see a tighter Everton defence. But that's the only way things change under Koeman, is if there's an injury, then he'll bring someone else in, and it looks like Barkley's got to wait for that as well.
Yeah, it's tough on Ross Barkley, although in Koeman's defence, I would say that Barkley, he is one of those players, isn't he? You look at him and you go, yeah, there's a lot of talent there, but never seems to be consistently at it. And speaking of not consistently at it, Josh, I suppose Manchester United are consistently at it in that they consistently seem to be dropping points from winning positions. interesting course of events today. I want to get your opinion on the red card issue or non-red card issue of Marcus Rojo with a 2-footed. Well, I mean, it was a red card. I don't think anyone can really argue. It was an out of control wild challenge. They got away with that. So I'd be interested to get your views on that, and also your views on Ibrahimovic. If I put my teeth in, like Ross said, also getting away with an apparent sort of kick out at Seamus Coleman after scoring a rather interesting goal, which hit the bar and then hit the post and then kind of spun into the net. So what was your views on those two incidents, first of all?
So the red card incident, as I refer to it, because it was a red card, I think the only thing that saves Rojo is probably the reaction of Idris Gueye, who doesn't really make a fuss about it, and that's what players we'd expect them to do, but it's not what gets players sent off these days. You've kind of got to roll around a bit and look like you've been assassinated to get a player sent off these days, and perhaps that's what's swayed the referee just to throw a yellow up instead. With the Ibrahimovic thing, I'm going to have to go all Arsene Wenger and say I didn't see it, so I can't really comment on that one. I would say it's something that Ibra is prone to, just playing right on the edge and trying to get that one up on a player at a time. So he is prone to something like that, a very subtle, not necessarily foul, but just a lazy elbow left in here, a dodgy touch there, just to leave something on a player to make sure that the centre back, or in this case right back, knows he's there and try and give himself a bit more space so that the player back off him.
I can confirm, having watched him for many years, that there is a side to him that definitely has that little bit of niggle involved.
I'm just thinking of the John Terry elbow.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, he's quite prone to the sly things, and because he's such an accomplished athlete, he tends to get elbows and feet all different places and shapes and sizes.
On the flip side, that chip. Beautiful.
Oh, it was magnificent. Yeah, Stekelenburg was walkies, but yeah.
It might just be the corner of Twitter I live in, but I didn't see very much in the way of reaction to that goal. If that hits the back of the net and makes the net ripple, I think we're all going mad over it. The fact it's hit the bar and the post, I think it's kind of put people off it, but it's such a good chip. I saw the Nice game tonight as well, and Belhanda has scored a fantastic chip as well, but that's up there with that Ibrahimovic chip. If you haven't seen that Ibrahimovic chip, it's beautiful to watch, and if it actually makes the net rustle, I think we're all talking about it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and Stekelenburg going walkies, as you would know well, Ross. But yeah, it's a very, very good goal. I have to say, credit where credit's due. It's a lovely take, and Zlatan has not done too bad. I think I saw a stat. I think it's something like 12 in 21 since joining United. So for a player who was apparently not good enough to cut it in the Premier League, he isn't doing bad for a 35-year-old.
Oh, we should also mention that Manchester stat that I baffled you with yesterday, day before.
Yes, yes.
It's now old, so it's kind of a null point. But until United had beaten West Ham this week, I think it was in the Cup they beat West Ham, wasn't it? Until that result, no one had won in Manchester since September, which includes both Manchester City and Manchester United.
That, my friends, is a stat, if ever I had one. So yes, that is quite the stat. But as you say, it has technically come to an end. Although in the league, we can still keep it going.
In the league.
We'll keep peddling it. I like it. But nevertheless, a 1-1 draw doesn't really suit either side. A lot of Manchester United fans are on the back of Fellaini for the giving away the penalty. It was on the edge, but it was stupid enough to give away. And I think most fans would probably say that Paul Pogba is fast becoming the Manchester United fan scapegoat as well. Another sort of fairly average performance, if truth be told. So, yeah, not a good day for either sides particularly, but at least they didn't lose the game. I guess that's the happy side of it. But speaking of a side that did lose it, that game brings us on to our final game that was played at the weekend. Of course, we got Middlesbrough Hull tomorrow, but ahead of that game, the last weekend of the weekend's games played today was just an absolutely crazy game between AFC Bournemouth and Liverpool. Josh, Liverpool raced into a 2-goal lead, were dominant. I have to be honest, I was really impressed with them for long spells of the first half. They kept Bournemouth completely at arm's length. And then all of a sudden the fight back sort of started, and it went from 3-1 at the point to Liverpool to an incredible 4-3 to Bournemouth. Who, if anyone, do you put the blame or do you give the credit to in this game? Do you blame Liverpool for taking the foot off the gas and completely throwing the game away, or do you give all the credit in the world for Bournemouth for not giving up?
Well, you've got to give credit to obviously the underdogs here in this, because generally the underdog doesn't get the praise that they deserve when they get results like this. And everyone will be too busy getting on the back of Liverpool, going, Liverpool did this wrong, Liverpool did that wrong. But to see a comeback from, as you say, 3-1 down, to turn it around with Ryan Fraser taking the game by the scruff of the neck by getting a goal and an assist within 3 minutes, and Nathan Ake then bundling home the fourth goal. It's a problem that certainly Liverpool have got a very shaky defence, something that probably won't help them in their pursuit of the title. Lucas Leiva at right centre back and James Milner at left back isn't going to give the goalkeeper a lot of confidence, which we saw as he definitely didn't cover himself in glory, Karius. And I had seen fans calling for Mignolet to go back into goal. So you know how bad his performance was today if they're saying that.
It doesn't exactly instill confidence,
No.
Is it? No, it's not good. And Ross, what did you make of this? I mean, Karius is a good person to pick out because particularly the final goal, I mean, he has to save that. It's weird because he made a stunning save. In fact, 2 stunning saves, really, just before the goal. And then, as Josh said, Ryan Fraser came off the bench and ended up as man of the match, completely changing the game with his direct running. And this, for me, I think with Liverpool, it's a difficult one to touch on with Liverpool because people are very, especially Liverpool fans, are very, very much keen to say they're in a title race. And to be fair, they probably are in a title race. But for me, it's games like this that show why they're not going to win a title. Do you concur with that, giving away these goals?
Largely, I'd say there are caveats this week because Joel Matip wasn't in it, and they have had a much better defensive record when Matip has been in. But it's like Josh was just saying, you got Lucas as centre-back, you got James Milner at left-back, and Milner is only there because their other left-back is such a liability, you'd rather have someone that doesn't even play left-back at left-back. So they do have defensive issues, they do have problems there, and these are the games that we picked out at the start of the season why we didn't think they'd win it. You know, we always said from the beginning that they'll score 4, but they'll concede 5, and it's the issue that you have with them. If teams go at them, then they can get results like this. And it's great to see, you know, especially a club like Bournemouth, easily the biggest result in their history, and the biggest result they've had since they came up to the Premier League. As for Ryan Fraser, he's a player I really like. He's only 22. I saw him a lot in the Championship with Bournemouth, and then he went back on loan to Ipswich, and I couldn't believe he went on loan to Ipswich because he's such a good little player. And he was quite instrumental in their push towards the playoffs at the end of last season. So I think in Ryan Fraser they've got a real gem, but there's just not a lot of room for him at the moment because Wilshire's there as well, obviously. But great to see Ryan Fraser get a decent run out. As for the goalkeeper, I've not seen enough of him to decide whether I like him or not. But like we were just saying there, if Mignolet's being called back in, then huge problems. Surely it seems odd that a club like Liverpool's size can't just get a normal goalkeeper in. You know, and we've seen some hideous goalkeeping performances with this weekend from Bravo to the Liverpool keeper Karius and Fraser Forster as well. But his performance was not great, and if there'd just been a bit more confidence in their goalkeeper, then you just never know. Maybe one of those doesn't go in, especially the fourth one. The fourth one is a real howler from him. So, yeah, there's a lot of pressure on the defence, but sometimes you've got to look at your keeper as well, and he wasn't at the races today.
No, agreed. And maybe a goalkeeper would be on the shopping list of Jurgen Klopp in January. Although Karius, for me, he's the classic cliche: good shot stopper, not much else, unfortunately. And I do want to give a shout out at this point to somebody who goes by the name, or certainly on YouTube, they go by the name of Ivan DRZ or Drs. I don't know. Ivan. Anyway, Ivan quite rightly called me out last week and said, "Why do I hate Jurgen Klopp so much? Why do I not give them? Why do I not give him enough credit?" So I just wanted to give Ivan a nod. I don't hate Jurgen Klopp. I do. I respect the guy. I think he's very good copy. He's very passionate, and I like that. But I don't think passion alone or a press alone can win titles. And I just feel that, seeing him at Dortmund, it was a very similar set of circumstances. He had attractive, fast-paced, fast-flowing football when he was at Dortmund, but ultimately it all went sour. And I just think that a side like Liverpool, it's great that he's so passionate and has taken the time to learn about the club. And don't get me wrong, I think he will improve them. He has already, let's be honest. But I just think games like this today are the reason why he will struggle ultimately to achieve what a lot of the supporters think he will. But we shall see. And as Josh said there, full credit to Bournemouth. I mean, they were fantastic that last 25 minutes or so. Just absolutely brilliant. And they really fed off that crowd, which I think is going to be crucial to them staying in the league this year. And I know that sounds like a crazy thing to say because they're doing pretty decently at the moment. What are they up to? 10th at the moment. I still feel when the winter comes, I do worry they don't score enough goals, which I know is crazy to say when they've won 4-3, but certain games, I think it was something like they've only scored 3 times in the last 4 games or something like that. So just wonder if they'll score enough goals when results go against them, but we'll see. And credit is due. They were magnificent today, so good on them. Okay, so that's pretty much draws a line under the games for this week with regards to the Premier League. Anyway, we should, as I say, say Hull, Middlesbrough tomorrow. Don't think it's going to be a classic, but we've said this before, haven't we, Ross? With the last 2, was it Swansea, Stoke, and who was it last week?
Oh, it was
Burnley, West Brom. Yeah, goals galore. So we shouldn't write it off just yet. Maybe it will be a thriller. But,
and let's not forget Red Monday as well. Everyone thought Red Monday was going to be an absolute blitzkrieg. Yes. It was awful.
Yeah, it was the most dreadful game of football ever. Yeah, agreed. We shall see. But I don't know how many people will be tuning in for that. We should have a quick look at the revised table before we move on to all things Championship and FA Cup for another week. So the table is Chelsea are top, 34 points, and they are 3 points clear at the top now, out on their own, 34 from their 14 played. Arsenal are second now, out on their own, 31 points from their 14 played. Liverpool, Manchester City level on 30 points apiece, third and fourth respectively. Spurs have closed the gap slightly, 27 points in fifth. Manchester United sixth. West Brom, as we mentioned earlier, up to seventh. Everton, Stoke and Bournemouth make up the top 10. Down at the bottom, Swansea back to the bottom, 9 points from their 14 played. Hull City, obviously with that game in hand, are in the bottom 3. They can exit that with a win tomorrow. Sunderland, Arsenal in the bottom 3, but again rising up to 11 points with West Ham, Middlesbrough and Leicester, as you say, Ross, really looking over their shoulders now on 13 points for Leicester and 12 each for West Ham, and Middlesbrough. And I would say Burnley and Palace are still looking over their shoulders a little bit as well. So, yeah, tough times for those clubs down there at the bottom end, and we will continue to cover how things progress in the coming weeks. Just a quick look ahead at next week's fixtures. Either of you guys have a game you really fancy? I guess that Sunderland-Swansea game is the one that leaps off the page. Man United Spurs on the Sunday as well?
Yeah, I think Liverpool-West Ham could have a few goals in it as well after this weekend.
Oh yeah, I didn't see that one.
That's a very tasty fixture. And Burnley at home to Bournemouth could be another big one for Burnley especially. Yes,
and Leicester hosting Man City as well, because it's all of a sudden quite a big game for Leicester. And you can imagine I think it's the tea time kickoff on Saturday. So, you imagine that crowd at the King Power being all up for that. Man City could be under scrutiny in that game. So, especially with their leaky defence. Oh, goodness me. Wonder if Mr. Vardy will come good in that game. We shall see.
All 3 goals they conceded to Chelsea were on the counter. Some very quick counter-attacking plays for Leicester.
That sounds right, actually. Yeah, that sounds right. The Costa goal in particular, that was a wonderful goal. I'm not his greatest fan, I'll freely admit, but wonderful goal. There's
a wonderful stat about Costa at the moment that since New Year's last year, he's been involved in 30 goals in 28 games.
Wow.
20 goals, 10 assists.
Says a lot, doesn't it?
It says a lot since Jose left them.
Yeah, that is impressive. But yeah, that's the fixtures next week. As we say, those are the ones I've picked out. We've also got Watford Everton is the lunchtime game. Burnley Bournemouth, Hull Palace, Swansea Sunderland. We mentioned Chelsea West Brom is the other Sunderland. Is the other Sunday game. And of course there'll be lots of Sunday games next week because there's teams in the Europa League, which means Southampton playing Middlesbrough and Liverpool West Ham, as you said. It's a big game for West Ham at Anfield, isn't it? Crikey, they could be in all sorts of trouble. And then the week after that, we got a midweek fixture list as well. Looking at those fixtures ahead, Everton Arsenal leaps off the page, as does
Bournemouth Leicester could be a big game.
Yes,
depending on what happens in the previous weekend.
Really could, couldn't it? That's on the same night actually as well.
It
and
is.
Sunderland Chelsea. That's quite a big test for Chelsea with a resurgent Sunderland. So plenty of games to look forward to. We'll try our best to cover those in the weekend after. So we'll do our best. Right. Okay. Let's leave the Premier League behind then for this week and transition into a little EFL. Well, specifically Championship talk this week because there's been a lot of FA Cup games played as well. So I'm going to hand over first of all to Ross, and then we'll have a little natter with Josh about his bits and bobs that he's seen in the Championship as well. So, what's been happening this weekend, Ross?
Well, you may or may not know. May or may not have known we've been doing the 10 in 10 on Sky this week as well. So you might have enjoyed a bit more English Championship games than you might normally have. On Thursday we had Queen's Park Rangers versus Wolverhampton Wanderers. That finished 2-1 to Wolves. There was a red card in that for James Perch as well, if memory serves, for Queen's Park Rangers. Friday night we had a quite amazing game between Nottingham Forest and Newcastle United. Second brilliant Friday night game in 2 weeks. The first half had 2 Newcastle United red cards, 2 Nottingham Forest penalties, both saved by ex-Nottingham Forest goalkeeper Carl Darlow. And then Nottingham Forest went 1-0 down to Matt Ritchie's goal. The second half they came back out absolutely storming, ended up winning it 2-1. An own goal from former Nottingham Forest man Jamal Lascelles with the winner. So crazy game. So many stories coming out of that one, but a mental game opened up the title race a bit more once again. The Saturday fixtures, Birmingham City losing 3-0 to Barnsley at home is a bit of a shock. Didn't see that one coming considering how well Birmingham have been doing lately. Blackburn Rovers, they got a really good win over Newcastle last week, and then today, or this weekend I should say, they held Huddersfield Town, who have been on a bit of a wobble lately, it has to be said, but that's still a fantastic point for Blackburn Rovers. Ipswich Town going down 2-0 to Bristol City. I think that puts Ipswich even further down the league now, and that's very concerning for them because they haven't really got going this year. But now being a very good 2-1 win over Rotherham. It's important points to pick up because Rotherham have just lost Kenny Jackett. He walked out on them this week after I think 3 or 4 weeks in charge. Sounds like he's had some disagreements with the board over transfer funds in January, so that's a massive loss for Rotherham because they weren't doing brilliantly under Kenny Jackett, but certainly they were a stronger unit when they had a manager and B, one that knew the Championship quite well. Cardiff 0, Brighton 0, a bit of a dour game. I think Cardiff went there especially to just kind of break things up and make it hard for Brighton, but fantastic point for Cardiff City, one they probably didn't really think they were going to get considering the recent run Brighton have been on. 2 5-0s as well this weekend. Fulham beating Reading 5-0, which is a staggering scoreline considering how well Reading have done lately. And Norwich City 5, Brentford 0. Awful for Brentford, but after the run Norwich have been on, that's a massive win for Alex Neil. I know last week we were talking about maybe being pressure on Alex Neil, maybe it was time for him to move on. Should they be looking for someone new? But that's a massive result. Sheffield Wednesday 2, Preston North End 1. That was mainly mired by 2 players for Preston having a fight. I think it was Beckford was one of them. I can't think of who the other one was, but both getting sent off late in the game for fighting each other. I think Simon Grayson said afterwards that you expect it in the playground, and he wasn't taking sorry after the game. So probably some problems for them backstage now. Wigan losing 1-0 to Derby County. Don't think that's a major shock. Derby have been on quite the upward trajectory lately, but Wigan desperately needed those points. They've got Newcastle, Aston Villa in the next 2 games, so that was a big chance to get something, but they couldn't find the goal to get a point. And one of the other big shocks from the weekend, Steve Bruce's first defeat as Aston Villa manager. They lost 2-0 to Leeds United.
2-0 indeed. I was hoping to watch that, but obviously due to reasons of being an Arsenal fan, I kind of couldn't, so followed along with it. That Forest game, Josh, did you see that one on Friday? I mean, that was absolutely crackers. Henry Lansbury wasn't a very popular figure that night, a player that you'll know a little bit about, diving all over the place and
absolutely
getting players sent off, missing a penalty. Nicholas Bentner missing a penalty as well. Just really crazy. And Newcastle beaten for the third game in a row, technically. Do you have any worries about them and their promotion push?
Well, from my stance as a Brighton fan, I'd like to see Newcastle lose their next 10 games in a row because that'll help us out no end. But I think Rafa will be able to turn this around. I think it's just expected that they're going to have a dip in form. John Joe Shelby just completely losing his head in that game. As well as it was Dummett that got sent off, was it?
Yes,
second one.
Last man, a little bit suspicious of whether it was a foul or not, but yeah.
Yeah, the fact that they managed to hold on for so long shows you what quality there is in that team, that with even 9 men, they can hold back a team like Nottingham Forest, who have been on a great run. I don't think there's anything more to add, to be honest, on Newcastle's run, because I think they will turn it around, to be honest.
Yeah, it shows you the arrogance of Newcastle, though, that they rested players last weekend in preparation for the League Cup in midweek, because they genuinely thought they could get the semi-final. They were looking to win that cup, get some European football for their big debut up in the Premier League under Rafa Benitez. So some good arrogance from them, but yeah, it's been a rough week. It's kind of backfired on them.
And had they not been celebrating quite so hard, they wouldn't have conceded an equaliser against Hull, because that came directly from the kickoff, didn't it? Then they conceded. So, yeah, and as for that Preston incident, my goodness me. What about Brighton, Josh? A 0-0 draw with Cardiff? Is it a point game?
Yeah.
Is it disappointing given Newcastle dropping points?
It was a frustrating 0-0 draw. It was one of those games where everything that's been going for Brighton in the last few games, or last couple of weeks, where the ball's dropping just at the right place and you get the right bounce, like the Glenn Murray had a goal disallowed for a foul that maybe last week wasn't given. It's one of those that it's just unfortunate. And then Bong, who's been absolutely brilliant at left back this season, a player who previously I haven't really rated, but has proven me wrong, got sent off at the end. So it looks like we've got Pocanoli from West Brom will be coming in, who we've got on loan just to cover that. So we've got a very ample replacement from that, even though we do have a lot of injury worries at the back at the moment.
Yeah, tough period of time, but it is a crazy division. I know, Russ, you've been selling me the idea of looking at the Championship, and I have been a lot. So it's like you've
been trading leagues this year.
I was just going to say, you transitioned to Liga and I've transitioned to the Championship. It's been fun, but I'm enjoying it. FA Cup weekend this weekend as well for people. Ross, there's a couple of games maybe we should touch on that happened today.
Yeah, there's a couple of shocks and a couple of stories coming out. There's one I do want to pick out. Well, it was a 0-0, and it's not all that entertaining, but it's more the stories of the managers. We had Charlton Athletic versus Milton Keynes Dons on Saturday. Charlton Athletic now managed by Carl Robinson, who left the MK Dons about 3-4 weeks ago, and Milton Keynes Dons now taken over by Robbie Nielsen, who left Hearts in midweek. I think he sent a decoy to fend off the press wearing a Robbie Nielsen mask so he could sneak into a car and drive off, which is a fantastic story. But they met this weekend in their first games. Actually, no, I think Nielsen starts in the next game, doesn't he? But yeah, it's Carl Robinson's first game in charge at Charlton, and it was against MK Dons, and it ended 0-0, so that's going to go to a replay, obviously. But the big stories from the FA Cup this week, I think the first one was Curzon Ashton. They were 3-0 up against AFC Wimbledon and managed to blow it all in the last 10-15 minutes, and they lost 3-4. Which is a real shame, because that's a massive scalp that would have been for Curzon Ashton. Sutton United on the Saturday, they got the biggest scalp of the weekend, I think, with a 2-1 win over Cheltenham, although that is arguable because Bristol Rovers were heavily favoured to beat Barrow, who I've got a friend who's a massive Barrow fan, and he was very sceptical of this one, but they went down to Bristol Rovers and got a fantastic 2-1 away result, which doesn't overly surprise me because Barrow have been fantastic in the conference this year. So those are probably your biggest shocks. Aside from that, there weren't really a lot of stories coming out of this weekend, I don't think. I mean, Eastleigh Town and Halifax Town are going to go to a replay. They drew 3-3, which was a pretty good game, but no shocks. And there was some very dull 0-0s and 1-0s. So hopefully the third round can kick the FA Cup into higher gear. But we did have a few shocks and some impressive games.
Yeah, lots of 0-0s. I noticed the BBC game that they pulled for Friday night was a 0-0. It's like it can be one of those you just pick the wrong one. But nevertheless, the FA Cup, as you say, is kicking into a gear soon, and the third round draw, of course, is in early January. So we'll see who progresses from those replays, and we'll be across that as usual. Okay, we've got one question and a shout out before we leave. The question comes in from a gentleman that Josh knows very well, Mr. Ellis Mel. He simply says this: Josh is ginger. Is Ross ginger too? No, he's not, but still. He says, but my question is, can you make a starting 11 of only ginger players, past and present? Now, I was going to do this as homework, but have we got enough that we can
I
do
think
this
I could do it because I've built FIFA teams out of gingers.
Have you? Okay.
Yeah.
So in that case, then a goalkeeper
is the ex-Bolton one who's now at Liverpool.
Adam Bogdan.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Oh, he's at Wigan at the moment. He's on loan at Wigan.
Is he?
He is, yeah. So he's our goalkeeper. Ross, I presume we have to have James Collins, don't we, as a centre back?
I think he's
Surely.
more bold than ginger, isn't he?
I suppose, yeah. Any advance on James Collins, Josh, for you?
I can't think of another one off the top of my head.
I can only think of one ginger defender, and that's Dean Lewington, but he was a former MK Dons League One player.
What about the wasn't there someone at Middlesbrough? I'm sure there was a... Maybe I'm thinking of Phil Stamp, but that was a long time ago. I'm sure there was a player. I mean, we can have him, I suppose, past and present, but present it seems like it's harder. So, who else can we have then from the present in our side? Have we got any fullbacks that we can think of?
No, I can only think of old ones.
Yeah. Who else can we have then? Duncan Watmore. He's ginger, isn't he? We can have him.
Yeah,
You can have Harry Reid and Paul Scholes.
Harry Reid, yeah. Paul Scholes, Steve.
Kevin Doyle. Is it Kevin Doyle? Or no, Dave Kitson.
Dave Kitson you can have. Yeah, ex-Pompey. Yeah, definitely have him. I can't think of any current. You could have Sean Dyche managing.
Oh, there's a couple at Hull, and I can't think of their names.
Yes.
Hull are ginger this year.
Yes, Stephen Quinn, isn't it? Stephen Quinn.
Yes,
I'm sure,
there's quite a few Irishmen in there.
He's we can have Stephen Quinn. I'm sure there's one at Stoke. I'm frantically looking through their squad now at their pictures. Maybe I'm wrong. I thought there was a ginger at Stoke, but maybe there isn't. So I take that back. So I don't know how many we've pulled there. Any advances? Anybody else got anyone they want to throw? I just said Steve Sidwell. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Did I just phase out because I was frantically Googling for ginger footballers?
Potentially. The only Brian one I could think of was Kerry Mayo.
Oh, Jack Colback.
That's a very old one.
Jack Colback's another one. Kerry Mayo's a good shout.
And he can play fullback, so there you go. There's a fullback.
Of course, the Ginger Pirlo.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. There you go. I can't think of any Arsenal players other than Mustafi that's kind of gingerish.
Mustafi, I'd like to say, is my doppelganger.
There you go then. So you can have Mustafi.
You can have that. From Arsenal, Ray Parlour.
Oh, naturally. Yeah.
Was Brown ginger?
He dyes it, doesn't he? I don't think you can. I don't think you can claim that.
Really, isn't it?
No.
Yeah.
You have Freddie Ljungberg. He had red hair.
No, I'm not allowing that one. I'm disallowing that one. Wasn't Nicky Butt? Wasn't he ginger?
Yes, I think so. It's on the cusp.
Can have a Scholes and Butt partnership in midfield. Yeah. That's something, and I'm sure isn't there one at Everton? I'm again frantically googling players' names here, but I don't know. Maybe no, they all look pretty. I mean, Ross Barkley's kind of bordering on, as is James McCarthy, but no, not having that.
Having them.
Well, there you go. We've done our best. I don't know if we've actually put together an 11 there, but I'd like to throw this to the listeners. So if you have a ginger footballer that you think we haven't mentioned from past or present, tweet us. And just to make it fun, tweet us a picture. So I fully expect to log into the podcast account tomorrow and see a series of ginger footballer pictures tweeted to us. So if you do that, we will give you a retweet and build a ginger 11. I think there's one at Southampton as well.
Harry Reid is the holding.
Is it just Harry Reid? Yeah.
I can't think of anyone else. So.
No.
Unless you count ginger beards, because then you could have Xavi Alonso and you could have Josh Sims.
Oh yeah, Xavi Alonso. Yeah, he had a lovely ginger beard, didn't he? I think Bogdan is the best pick of the lot because he is proper ginger, isn't he? So
he is.
There you go. Gingers have feelings too. Everybody remember that. So there you go. So yeah, please do tweet us your ginger footballers, and we will do our best to retweet those when we get them. Thanks for the question, Ellis. You devil, you. Okay, I want to give a little shout out this week, as I promised I would, to a gentleman called on YouTube. He's called BulldogMitch99, and his Twitter handle is @MitchellCoplin or Coplin. Sorry, Coplin. So Mitchell, I believe that's your first name, a little shout out to you. He left us a very nice comment on our YouTube page saying that we're his number one go-to football podcast. So keep up the great work. That's high praise indeed. So thank you very much for that, Mitchell. I said I'd give you a little shout, and here is your little shout, and I'm sure the guys would say the same. So keep listening, and obviously if there's anything you want to feedback, please do. You can comment on our YouTube page like Ivan did. If you think we're being unfair on a team, or you think we're not covering your team enough, let us know. We will do our very best to cover them, whilst keeping it fair, of course, because a lot of people want to hear about the big teams. So we apologise if we haven't mentioned your team, but if we haven't, let us know and we will address it. Right, okay. I think that will do it for this week's podcast then. Other than, actually, before we do, sorry, I've forgotten one other thing, because Josh, you wanted to just briefly mention we have a new England manager officially now, and you wanted to have a little bit of a platform this week just to have your soapbox moment on Mr. Gareth Southgate. So I'll do what I do with Ross. I'll hand the show over to you at this point and let you rant away. What's your thoughts?
Thank you very much. It's probably one of the most underwhelming appointments that has ever happened for the England manager. I think there was a lot going on beforehand that probably made it a safe appointment. However, English football has needed an overhaul since probably McLaren and the demise of the golden generation. And we've had plenty of false dawns and plenty of groups of players getting together and heads of FAs saying, oh, this is our vision for the future, and plenty of false dawns. And just appointing Southgate feels just a very, nah, this is going to be the same old England. And the England national side, I do continue to follow them, albeit I've been a bit disillusioned with them for the last couple of games, and I haven't really wanted to see them kind of play because they are just awful. I think that's coming now from the FA, and if they're putting Southgate in and giving him a 4-year contract, which again seems absurd for a man who's only really managed for 6 years in his career, 3 years in club football with Middlesbrough and a nearly 30% win rate, and 3 years at the under-21s with, albeit an impressive 82% win rate, but that's at under 21 level, and results aren't always key at that. You're looking for player development, and the fact that 81% hasn't really translated to the full side, and we're getting some awful results and getting knocked out to Iceland, and another group of ex-players like Danny Mills and Rio Ferdinand coming together and offering their 5 pennies worth. It's just really not helping. Personally, I would have wanted someone like Klinsmann, who would have taken the FA by the scruff of the neck, a bit like what happened with Germany about 10 years ago when that revolution started. Just someone to make sure that the plans that they want to put down are going to happen. Kind of scrap the national team for a couple of years, get the under-21s playing. Anyone who's eligible for that in the full team should be playing there, and get that group of players coming through and just start over again. But whether or not the media will allow for that, I think that's the biggest question with the manager. And so if the FA are going to be strong enough, then I'll be happy to see Southgate at the helm, because I think he is a manager that can be told what to do, and you can't necessarily bring in a bigger ego. And at the moment, I think he was the best option other than Klinsmann. And I think the media would have gone mad for bringing a German in to fix English football, although I would have been fine with it.
So would I. Not that I actually care too much, but no, so would I. Ross, do you want to have just a quick say on Southgate? We got time to give you a little say as well.
I just think England fans and the FA seem to have this idea that he's going to be our Pep Guardiola, that we've brought through the system, that he's been there with the youth team, he knows what's going to come up next, he knows what kind of football we want, now he can carry it on to the first team, bring up some kids, he can be here for a few years, etc. I just don't see it. I'm much in the same boat. It's a very meh appointment. You look at it and go, oh yeah, well I understand where that's come from. I would have rather have seen someone like Ralph Rangnick get it, who's got a history of bringing through kids and working on it and actually being a good coach rather than being a good manager. And I think that's what England players need, is to be coached into being a better team, because the starting 11 at the moment is just not up to scratch. The media is the biggest problem, and so the fans. I think there's two types of England fan. There's the one that goes mental and loves it when we win just a game by 1-0, and then there's the kind of fan that goes mental and loves it when we lose a game by 1-0. I don't think either really help. I think you need to be in the middle, just be realistic about it and say we're an average national team, we need a lot of work. If we win, then great. If we lose, then okay, move on to the next one. There needs to be a restructuring of opinion and the way that fans relate to their national team and the way they interact with it, and until that happens I don't think any England fan's going to be particularly happy with it. So I'm much in the same boat. I think Southgate's a bit of a meh appointment, but there just feels this idea to me that he's going to be our Pep to our Barcelona, and I just don't see it happening.
No, I agree with both of you, and I think the first decision that he made, continue with Wayne Rooney as captain, for me that said everything. Relying on a player who clearly has, decided that he's above the team at times. His conduct, he feels, is however he chooses to conduct himself. And before we get letters of complaint, I'm not saying that players can't enjoy themselves, but when you're the England captain and you're in England attire or any other national team attire, I think you have a responsibility to not act like a pillock. Which for me, Wayne Rooney did act like a pillock during the recent episode. So, yep, for me, if you're going to just say that's fine and carry on regardless and keep him as captain when he really shouldn't even be in the squad, in my opinion, that sort of says it all. I've got nothing against Gareth Southgate, but as you both have said, it's very, very underwhelming. So much so that it just seemed to drift through like nobody had even mentioned it on the week. So, yeah. Not exactly blown away, but again, write us in. Let us know your thoughts. If you've got anything you want to add, please do. We will we'll agree or disagree on that one. But yeah, we'll see where England are in 2 years' time when Ross and I will be watching games galore and covering the next World Cup next, isn't it?
Yeah.
Crikey. In Russia, goodness me.
Well,
it does. Only a year away. My goodness. Anyway. We will draw a line there then, and let you lovely people go and enjoy your days, evenings, whatever it is when you're listening to us. Thank you very much, as usual, for tuning in and keeping us in your ears. We do appreciate it. We're still, as Ross said, we're still in our infinite stage. We're still only really a year old, so to still be putting out content is really cool, and we really appreciate people listening in to us and giving us your feedback. So stick with us, and if you've got friends, just in general, if you have friends, but if you've got friends who like football and maybe don't have us on their podcast list, let them know what we do, and maybe we'll grow some more listeners and expand our ever-growing universe. So keep it coming. Anyway, my thanks to both Josh and Ross for your time this evening, gentlemen.
pleasure as ever.
Thank you very much.
And we will, of course, return next week with another packed week of football action to cover, or weekend, I should say. So until then, keep your beard strong and your glasses trendy. We've been the Football Hipsters podcast, and we'll speak to you very soon.